Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and welcome also to our live stream audience. My name is Amanda, and I'm part of the Haley Public Library team. It is my great pleasure tonight to introduce Shannon Jackson, who is here this evening to take us on an awe-inspiring as her challenging bikepacking adventure through Iceland. She is a retired dietitian, a sports nutritionist, an author, a photographer, an avid Nordic skier, a mountain biker, and a hiker. Shannon Jackson and her husband Dawn embarked on a July 2025 trip to Iceland, an unsupported cycling journey across the island. They traveled through landscapes of bright green, moss-covered volcanoes, colorful mountains, and vast lava fields. Ferocious wind, rain, glacial river crossings, and miles of desolate volcanic sand added to the challenge and made the experience unique. When asked about their Iceland trek, Shannon said, "When I started the ride, I was worried the challenges would be too demanding, and yet, after 10 days, I never wanted the trip to end. I enjoyed the desolation, solitude, and monochromatic landscape, and was surprised by how much I would later appreciate the presence of color and the simple sound of a bird's call. I am sure you will be swept away by her adventures as she guides you through the grand and thrilling landscapes of the land of fire and ice." Please help me welcome Shannon. Thank you.
Okay, I should be live. Thanks, Amanda, for the warm welcome and introduction, and thank all of you for being here this evening and for your interest in our trip through Iceland. First thing I'm going to do is go ahead and introduce my husband, Don. Don, wave to everybody, just in case they don't know you. He's going to be the face on most of those photos, so I wanted to make sure that you knew who he was. Okay, let's get started. To make sure that we are all thinking about the same place, Iceland, it's located in the North Atlantic between Greenland and Norway, just below the Arctic Circle, and for reference, it has the same latitude as Fairbanks, Alaska. We flew into Reykjavik, which is over on the western part of the island. My pointer isn't going to work. My slides are too bright, so I can't use the laser pointer. I'm going to be doing a lot of this tonight. Just bear with me. We flew into Reykjavik and had a car service drive us to the southern tip down to the small town of Vik. We actually cycled from the south to the north, from Vik to Akureyri on what is called the Iceland Divide. Now, it's called the Iceland Divide for more than just the fact that it visually divides the country into two halves. Our route roughly followed the fault line of the mid-ocean ridge where the Euro-Asian and the North American tectonic plates are slowly moving apart, causing a lot of volcanic activity. Our route traveled past volcanoes and in lava fields and glaciers, including the Vatnajökull Glacier, which is considered the fourth largest ice field in the world. The road that goes around the island is called the Ring Road. And with about 385,000 people living on the island, most of them live in the small towns that are around the Ring Road, with about 60% of the population living in Reykjavik. This area here, in between the ice caps, that area is called the Central Highlands. And it is an uninhabited area that is only accessible a few months out of the year when it's clear of snow. We scheduled our trip in July, hoping that the snow would be gone from the high plateaus that we planned to cross. The Iceland Divide is known for being as challenging as it is beautiful. I would say it's not for everyone, but for individuals who want a more rugged and unique experience, it is awesome. Although the route is only 344 miles long, Bikepacker.com gave it a rating of a 9 out of 10 because of the challenges. There's the harsh, unpredictable weather, the volcanic sand and rock, You've got numerous river crossings, and there's a lack of services, meaning that there are no resupply points along the route. You have to be completely self-sufficient. The route is most often done from north to south. We chose to do it from south to the north because we wanted to end in Akureyri, which is a much larger town, and we would be able to easily fly from Akureyri back to Reykjavik at the end of our trip. We felt so fortunate to have chosen to stay at Guest House Galtafell in Reykjavik, both at the beginning and the end of our trip. The guest house is located just a couple blocks from downtown, which made it very easy to get those last-minute items that we needed, like a lighter or the fuel canister for our camp stove. They also allowed us to leave our duffel bags and our bike boxes with them until the end of our trip when we returned to Reykjavik. It seemed like in Reykjavik and every other town that we visited, there was always a landmark church high up on a hill that made things so easy to maneuver ourselves in the city because we could always see the church and we could orient ourselves. This one has beautiful architecture created to resemble a waterfall, like the many waterfalls that they have across the country. Our car service drove us and our loaded bikes to the small town of Vik to start our journey. Vik is known for its striking sea stacks, its black sand beach, and its nesting puffin colony with 1,000 mating pairs. The sea stacks can be seen from any location in town. They were made famous when they were used in season 7 of the popular television series Game of Thrones. The Black Sand Beach is considered one of the most beautiful beaches in the world, and the cliffs above it are home to a large Icelandic puffin colony. I really admire these birds. Puffins mate for life. They come here from June to September to nest in the cliffs high up above the Black Sand Beach. And then after September, they separate and they head out into the North Atlantic where they spend the next 8 months on the open water. Amazingly, they lose the color in their beaks and their white feathers turn a gray to help them camouflage themselves from ocean predators while they roost on the water surface. And then, they survive, first I say they survive by diving for fish. They can dive as deep as 200 feet using their wings as flippers. And then they return in June to the cliff, find their mate, and the cycle begins all over again. We just really loved seeing them in their natural habitat. We would begin our journey the next day, leaving Vik on the ring road before turning into the interior and making our way around the Merjajakut Glacier, which is that's not clouds, that's actually a glacier up there, and that's where we'll be heading. Okay, when we arrived in Iceland, it was raining, and when we left 15 days later, it was raining. The storms throughout our trip weren't really a surprise because Iceland's weather is dominated by what is called the semi-permanent Icelandic low. It's where the warm Gulf Stream currents are flowing north and the cold Arctic Ocean waters are coming south and they meet over Iceland, causing a low pressure system, lots of rain, and horrendous wind. We made our reservations for July, and I was hoping for 24 hours of sunlight and warm temperatures, but the odds were never in my favor. The first 24 miles of our journey was on the paved ring road. To avoid heavy traffic, we headed out really early at 4:30 in the morning, and it was in a downpour with a strong wind. When we turned off the pavement onto this gravel road, the storm just grew in intensity. It would rain for 18 hours. And although riding in the rain isn't fun, I did have confidence in our gear because the previous year, Don and I had traveled to the Arctic of Alaska, and we'd gotten caught in a typhoon that hammered us with rain, snow, and high winds. Our gear worked well then, so I expected it to keep us comfortable this time. For just a quick overview of our gear, I'll start at the bottom. We wore normal cycling shoes, but we had special wool socks that had a waterproof membrane. And then we had rain pants and a rain jacket. But probably the most important items that we had were those clear plastic shower caps we wore on our helmets. They kept the rain from coming through the vents and getting our head wet and running down our necks. And then those blue XXL large size dishwashing gloves. They looked a little funny, but they fit over even our heaviest cycling gloves, keeping our hands dry and warm. The scenery in the southern section of our trip was really pretty. They had a lot of flowing rivers, a lot of green hillsides, but with all of the rain and the cloud cover, we couldn't really capture its beauty in a picture. This would be the clearest photo that I had from that first day. There were a dozen water crossings on our first day of cycling. Most of them we were able to ride through without difficulty. However, 4 miles from our destination, our route crossed a braided river that became a major threat. We started across going from sandbar to sandbar. However, what looked like firm sand was so saturated with water that when we stepped on it, we would sink and have to pull our feet out of a thick sludge. As we moved further across the water began to rise, with land masses disappearing in front of our eyes. As I looked back over my shoulder, I saw there was no retreat. The sandbars we had just crossed were no longer visible, and all I saw was just a sea of water. We couldn't stay where we were, and even though we couldn't see where we were going, our only option was to keep moving forward and hope that we reached dry land. It was an intense and physically demanding process, but we finally got ourselves across. It took us more than 2 hours to go 4 miles to get to Struder Hut, where we would stay for the night. After 14 hours of riding in extreme conditions, I fell asleep thinking that night, how am I going to endure this for 9 more days? But to my absolute delight, we woke up to sunny skies and warm temperatures, which allowed us to spread out our gear and dry it in the sunshine. I had no idea how beautiful the scenery was surrounding the hut because I couldn't see it when we had arrived the previous day. And as amazing as it was to see the water rise, it was just incredible to see it recede. That post that I'm about to ride past was not visible 12 hours earlier. Struder Hut is 2 miles off route. The previous evening, we have ridden past Mælifell, which is the most photographed volcano in Iceland, and the glacier that is in front of Don there. We couldn't see either of them because of the low-hanging clouds and the rain. In fact, we stood right there, noting the sign that says Struder that way, and we could not see the volcano. I cannot tell you how happy I was to have a clear day. The scenery on day 2 was stunning. The southern part of Iceland is filled with glaciers, volcanoes, and lava fields covered with a soft, vibrant green carpet of woolly fringe moss. Now, the interesting thing about this moss is it is the first plant life to colonize a barren lava field after an eruption. It's also very fragile, and for that reason, it is unlawful to travel anywhere but on established roads and trails in Iceland. Our route had us riding past Hekla volcano, which erupted in 1980, 1981, and as recent as the year 2000. Now, Hekla has an extensive lava field, and it's not green. It will take decades for the woolly fringe moss to establish its spores and become a sea of green on Hekla. On the third day, we traveled 17 miles off course to a special place called Landmannalaugar. The area is known for its colorful rhyolite mountains and its geothermal pools. In addition to the emerald green and black hills, our scenery would now include more reds, oranges, and peach-colored mountains. Landmannalaugar is a popular tourist location, and it can be accessed on a major gravel road directly off the ring road. Hikers, backpackers, campers, photographers all come here to hike the extensive trail system through the colorful mountains and then take a dip in the natural hot springs that are located behind those buildings. Now, Don and I wanted to see the pretty scenery, but we were also looking forward to visiting the Mountain Mall, which fancies itself as a grocery store and coffee house. There was a thermos of coffee, so I was able to get a cup of coffee. But more importantly, we were able to buy a meal and some snacks to supplement the food that we carried on our bikes. And those are our bikes there. And though our packs were bulging when we started our trip, we barely carried enough food to sustain us. It wouldn't fit. Our freeze-dried meals, nutrition bars, and cookies provided about 1,500 calories a day when we were burning closer to about 5,000. We knew we were going to be hungry. When we got to Landmannalaugar, Don and I had eaten 2 days of food, so I had a little bit of space in my pack. And my plan was to fill those packs back up with items from these shelves. We're also excited about getting a grilled Icelandic hot dog called a pizza at the bus. A pizza is different from an American hot dog because it contains 3 meats. It's a lamb, pork, and beef with some special seasonings. They were actually quite delicious. And more importantly, they again provided us with some much needed calories, and we were able to save one of our freeze rides for later on in the trip. Leaving Landmannalaugar, this view made me appreciate Icelandic lore, their belief that elves and trolls live in the volcanic mountains and in the lava fields across the country. A recent Icelandic university survey reported that 62% of the population believe in the hidden people, and the remainder are unwilling to deny the possibility of their existence. To this day, road construction projects in areas believed to be populated by trolls and elves are rerouted to avoid disturbing their natural habitat. 20 miles north of Landmannalaugar, we passed Sigurðarfoss Falls. When Don saw it, he immediately goes, "That looks like Blue Glacier Gatorade." The color was just unreal. We are now back on the official Iceland Divide route and excited to see the scenery that lay ahead. Well, before going any further, I want to talk about a few of the challenges that we faced in Iceland. I'll start with the wind. It's always blowing. Our packs acted like sails on a boat, and a big gust would come through and just blow us to the side of the road. We expended a lot of energy moving forward and had to compensate for the wind just to stay upright. I was hoping that by traveling from south to north that we might have more favorable winds and have more tailwinds. We had a few hours, but the biggest thing I would tell you that in Iceland, the wind doesn't go in one direction, and it doesn't stay in one direction in one day. It changes day by day, hour by hour. And there was no advantage to us going from south to north to having more tailwinds. At one point, Don and I had traveled down a road, and we were in a huge headwind. Don looked over me with a wry smile on his face and says, "Hey, let's get out of the wind and have some lunch." And I'm thinking, where are you going to get out of the wind? That's when he pointed over his shoulder at the big rock. And it was perfect. We hunkered down behind that rock and had a great lunch break. In a land that has no structures and no trees, you're always looking for a way to get out of the wind. Just like the wind, the sand is a constant challenge throughout all the terrain in Iceland. Now, we use the same bike setup that we had successfully used on the Great Divide mountain bike route and our journey through the Alaskan Arctic. However, we found that our 2.2-inch mountain bike tires were barely adequate for the sand that was in Iceland. And riding in the sand can be pretty slow and difficult. Don did take a couple falls, and I caught one on video.
Don took a fall. There's his chapstick. He went flying. You can see where he landed. No blood, amazingly. Sand, something else. Coming downhill, you see what happened. Got over into the soft stuff, and well, that's all she wrote.
Shortly after taking this picture, we met 3 southbound gravel riders, and they warned us that they had been walking for 2 days because they had very narrow tires. We found that we were able to ride most of the sand with our wider tires, but I do admit that it was difficult at times. Okay, the most significant challenge for us on the Iceland Divide was the river crossings. We would encounter only one pedestrian bridge, and there it is, the entire route across the country. Given the ferocity of that water, I was really glad that we had a way to walk across. This is a typical river crossing in Iceland. In the first half of our journey, we had dozens of these each day. The river crossings were so frequent, we quickly abandoned changing into water shoes to get across. We learned that lesson on day 1. Our water shoes became camp shoes. Most of these rivers and streams are glacial melt, and they're full of silt, making the bottom impossible to see. They were also very cold, averaging about 34 degrees. We would often scout up and down the riverbanks looking for areas that looked less turbulent and for gravel bars that meant the water was more shallow, making the crossing easier. We became pretty good at navigating the rivers. However, several would severely test our skills. And this is one of them. We knew about this river crossing in advance. We had been warned by the 3 gravel bike riders we had met earlier. Those poor guys, in addition to not being able to ride for 2 days, they also came to this river and they couldn't get across. They ended up spending the night on the riverbank and trying, and they were able to get through the next day early in the morning when the glacial melt had slowed and the river had gone down. We met another southbound cyclist who stopped to talk with us, and he had told us that he had taken a swim with his bike. He was able to hold on to it, so he did not lose it in the murky water, but he said he felt really fortunate to get himself and his bike to the bank, although it was some ways down the river. Now, we arrived in early morning, and this is our experience.
Hang on, this is the biggie. You want 2 at a time? Can we do it together? All right. I'll try it. Gonna take you? Well, let's go back.
Within just a couple of feet of leaving the bank, we found the water was way too rapid and too deep. We couldn't get across. We looked for another place to cross, but nothing looked real promising.
I don't know. One bite. Yep, it'll be ugly, but let's try it. Okay, I've got the feet. Yeah, I know. Aim for the rocks.
Don's saying, no way, it's too deep. Now I'm in a hole. I'm going deeper and deeper.
Can you go forward? Don't. Okay. Please push the bike.
He goes, I can't push it. It's I'm mired in the deep sand. Here, Don is up to his chest in the water. I'm trying to hold the bike to keep it
Straighten that wheel at all.
from pushing him under.
Straighten the wheel straight to head right there. Straighten it to head there.
And I'm pushing as hard as I can.
Ready? Aim for the rocks just like before.
Third time's the charm. We finally found a location that we felt we could cross. Now, the water's really murky here. We don't know how deep it is. We're having to step carefully. One misstep, we would have gone under. Notice how the bike is floating. We're not even rolling it. The force of the water is trying to pull it out of our hands and take it down the river.
Wow. Wow.
And I'm walking funny. My feet are frozen.
The force of that water was incredible. Sorry. Almost there. Almost there. Woo! And icy cold. Wow, survived it.
We would have to cross that river 3 times to get both bikes across. This major water crossing occurred on our 5th day of travel. We had successfully conquered the last of the big river crossings, but not without them leaving their mark. After all the river crossings, I was physically bloodied, battered, and bruised, but feeling emotionally triumphant at having successfully conquered the challenges of the terrain. From this day forward, we would begin traveling through the Central Highlands, where water crossings are no longer an issue. Now our focus will be shifted to finding water. Hello. Okay. Our landscape transitioned to vistas filled with mountains, volcanic sand, and gravel. Now we're relying on both the yellow wands and our GPS, because in this landscape, the roads can become sand covered and disappear in a matter of hours from the blowing wind. The further inland we traveled, there was an increasing amount of lava rock and, of course, the black volcanic sand. We also had sections of the route that were trackless, where we had to use our technical mountain biking skills to get across the very rocky lava field. Even in this harsh environment, a presence of water can create life. We were always on the lookout for a splash of color in an otherwise monochromatic landscape to find water sources in the Central Highlands. This spring was some distance from the route, so we hiked our bike over to it, filtered water, and had lunch. The existence of water in a black volcanic desert created a few striking, colorful landscapes, like this blue flowing river at the bottom of a deep canyon, or the area surrounding the stream that is covered with bright green grass and colorful flowers. We affectionately called this Fairy Tale Camp. After riding for hours through black sand, the colorful setting of grass and flowers was shocking to see, and we were instantly drawn to it. With the sound of the raging river as a backdrop, we had a very comfortable night's sleep. Most of our campsites were on volcanic sand. We stopped here late in the day after pedaling for 10 hours. We were low on water, and we saw the remnant snow patch there that's in the photo. It was on the side of a hill. Our next known water source was still a couple of hours away. Although the snow was covered in black volcanic sand, its slow melt provided a clear source of water for us to filter. Our coldest camp we named Cold Camp. It was at the base of the Vatnajökull Glacier, and it was here that we learned about yet another source of wind in Iceland called katabatic wind, which flows down the walls of a glacier under the force of gravity and can produce winds as high as 140 miles per hour in the Central Highlands. Fortunately for us, the wind was fairly mild, but it still felt like I had an air conditioner on full blast blowing into the tent all night. And that right there, what you were seeing, that is the edge of the glacier. It's just covered in black sand.
It is so cold this morning that we are cooking in the vestibule of our tent here in California. And this morning's breakfast is Rocky Mountain scrambled skillet with scrambled eggs, potatoes, and cheese. Yum, yum. And our chef today is the Don. Yay.
This is the first time that Don and I have actually cooked inside our tent. In fact, it's the first time that we've ever had food inside our tent. But we felt safe to do so because Iceland doesn't have any predators. This is our favorite campsite. It was up on a hill, sheltered from the wind by a large boulder. We called it Beautiful Desolation. There were no sounds except for the slight rustling of our tent in the light breeze. There was absolutely no signs of life. It was like we were the last living things on the planet. It was so tranquil, Don said it was the best night's sleep he's ever had. And if you think this area looks like the moon, our astronauts started training here in the 1960s for the Apollo moon missions. They continue to train here to this day for future missions to both the moon and to Mars. Parts of the Central Highlands are considered identical to the surface of Mars 3 billion years ago, and by studying the landscape, NASA hopes to be able to identify the presence of past life on Mars. On the 8th day of our journey, Don and I traveled to a hut called Botany, buried deep within a massive lava field. The route was difficult, but it was fun picking our way across the plateau and big slabs of lava rock and sand. We actually traveled on this type of terrain for the entire second half of the day. In the late afternoon, I started to get a little concerned about finding the hut because the terrain was growing increasingly difficult, and it really offered no clue to where the hut's location was. And at this point, I don't have yellow wands. I've got those little rock cairns to look for, and trying to look for those cairns in that environment with just rock, it was really difficult. Finally, after a couple more hours, there was a yellow wand and Botany appeared on the horizon. After riding in and out of rain and high wind all day, it was really nice to have shelter for the night in the hut. We would stay in 3 different huts that were on the Iceland Divide route. I talked about Struder the first day in the south, and we just mentioned Botany on the northern edge of the Central Highlands. The third one was Nidulur Hut that's located in the center of the country. The importance of the huts is not just that they provide shelter, but all of them are near or right next to a reliable water source. This is Nidulur Hut, and it's really more than a hut. It's actually a compound because it houses the Icelandic search and rescue team. It was my favorite because it had a hot shower. Yay. Okay, this is Ditchafell Hut. We did not stay at this hut, but we stopped because we needed water, and it had a reliable water source. The size and setup of this hut is typical for a hut in the Central Highlands.
This is Dingerfell Hut. It's really adorable. 4 sleeping pads on the bottom. We've got another 4 up on top in the loft. Lots of wonderful coffee cups for salad beds. Little tables that are built in just for the music. Stairs, more beds. It's just a great, great hut. And we've got a warm stove.
We spent a wonderful night at Botany and felt lucky because we had the whole place to ourselves. This photo was taken as we left Botany, and I just want to say, I want you to note the terrain that we had crossed the previous day to get there. We were quite surprised to find out that we had to repeat that effort to get out of Botany and get to the coastal plains. In fact, there you can see we'd finally made it to the coastal plains, and behind Don is all the lava field. Okay. I was delighted to hear the bird calling. We had not heard a sound life anywhere for 2 to 3 days. So the fact that we heard these birds was delightful. Within a couple miles, our double track transitioned into grass-covered rangeland where we began to see sheep. This one was taking shelter from the warm sun. Icelandic sheep are a little different from American sheep in that they are more solitary and not herd-type animals. They also have a different kind of coat on them. They all have horns, and their coats are actually a double layered with a long outer coarse one that helps protect them from the cold Icelandic environment. We also found Icelandic horses roaming the landscape. These horses are a little shorter in stature than American horses, and they are known for their beautiful coats, manes, and tails. So the last 20 miles of this day was on a maintained gravel road alongside this river with its colorful display of glacial melt and fresh water mixing. The road ended at a tiny community of Fosshall, which sits on the ring road. And I was determined to make it to Fosshall because I knew that this small cafe was there. And Don and I were out of food. We ate our last Cliff Bar on our way to the cafe. In an effort to reach the cafe before it closed for the day, we had to time trial and draft one another to get there. And it was a strong headwind, of course. We barely made it in time, and when I walked in and asked this cashier if I could still order food, she looked at her watch and she said, "You have 2 minutes to place your order." I quickly ordered 2 pizzas, and while they were cooking, I walked to the small hotel that was next door to see if any rooms were available. To my surprise, there was 1 room left. I was thrilled that we would have hot food and a hot shower that evening. Directly across the street from the cafe and the hotel was Goðafoss Waterfall. It's a major tourist attraction in Iceland. I had been warned by the hotel receptionist that if I wanted to visit the waterfall without a crowd, go late in the evening or very early in the morning before the busloads of tourists arrived from the cruise ships docked at Akureyri. This is Goðafoss at midnight. Our final day was a 30-mile ride on the paved ring road from Fosshall to Akureyri. Akureyri is at the end of this pretty fjord, and we're about 9 miles from the location. This view will also show the ring road. I will admit that Don and I were a little surprised that it had absolutely no shoulders on it. Akureyri is a routine stop for all the cruise ships that visit Iceland. We spent the night there and then flew from Akureyri to Reykjavik the next morning. The most interesting thing about our flight is that we did not have to pack our bikes. We simply rolled them up and they put them on the plane, and then they handed them to us when we were in Reykjavik, and we mounted them and rode off the tarmac on our way back to the guest house. Pretty unique there. We spent 2 nights in Reykjavik as tourists while we packed our bikes for our flight home. Our bodies craved sugar and fat, so we indulged in desserts with every meal. We visited as many bakeries as we could find, and we really liked the Icelandic donut. It has a soft cake center with a fried, crunchy outside and went really well with coffee, so we bought several and brought them back to the guest house to have them for treats. With our bikes boxed and our duffels full of gear, it was time to head home. When I started this ride, I worried the challenges would be too demanding. And yet, after 10 days, I didn't want the trip to end. I enjoyed the desolation, the solitude, and the monochromatic landscape, and was surprised by how much I would later appreciate the presence of color and the simple sound of a bird's call. Don and I were tested by the harsh environment, the wind, the rain, the water crossings, the deep sand, and the lava rock. But we were rewarded with amazing scenery and a sense of accomplishment. That together, supporting one another, we had successfully crossed Iceland. This may well be one of our most memorable trips. Months after returning home, we still look at each other and say, "Can you believe we completed the Iceland Divide?" If you enjoyed tonight's presentation and you'd like to know more about Don and my adventures, a copy of my book, Better and Happier Together, Stories of Epic Adventures During Our First 40 Years of Marriage, is available here at the library. My book is also in stock at our local Iconoclast bookstore, and it can be ordered from your favorite online bookseller. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight.
Hello, everybody. Not to sneak out as the gremlin in the corner, but if you guys have any questions, I'm sure that Shannon would love to answer any questions, but we're going to ask you to take your turn and raise your hand, and she would be happy to answer anything that you have. But I am going to ask the first question because this has been bugging me this whole time. Did you have to put in reservations to stay at the cabins, or was it just kind of first come, first serve? Or the huts, sorry.
For the huts, no, yeah. The hut system is formal. It's very much like our yurt system here, and you can reserve them in advance. Since we didn't know when we would actually arrive, we couldn't make any reservations because we just didn't know if we'd be delayed, bad weather, what have you. If you arrive and there's an opening, let's say there's a bed available, you can always stay there, but they are pay for it or have to be in advance. So like I said, in botany, I said we were surprised that we were by ourselves, but the next week it was completely booked. So all the beds would have been taken. Yeah. Anyone else have a question? Sure, Nate, go ahead.
Yeah. So were these bikes you owned?
The question is, were the bikes the ones that we owned? Yes, these are my old hardtail bike that I was on, and I refurbished it and made it into a gravel type bike. But it was what we owned, and the reason for that is packs, you could rent bikes, but getting our packs to fit them or making sure you have enough room in someone else's packs if you rent would be very difficult. So we took our own bikes, our own packs, and our own gear. Anyone else? Oh, yes.
What about bike maintenance en route and flat tires?
The question is, what about bike maintenance en route and flat tires? Well, my husband is a really good mechanic. And on his bike, I had most of the food, but his weight was in tools and the ability to fix. I mean, we had derailleur hangers. We had, of course, the tires and things to fit flats, but there are some things like spokes, different things that he had to fix just about anything, because you have to be self-sufficient on this route. There's nobody out there in the Central Highlands. You're on your own. Well, the question was, did I have any flat tires? None. Asked if we were tubeless. Yes, we were tubeless, and should I give a plug to race? We were on Continental Race Kings, and we went 2,700 miles on the Great Divide mountain bike route, no flats. We went to Alaska and did another 500, no flats. I really trust these tires. They've been really good for us. So Yes. He asked if my ride was really steep on some of the terrain. Yes, it was over 20% grades. And the trails are made for four-wheel drives and, you know, big, heavy trucks and things. So they weren't made with mountain biking in mind. So, yeah, some of them were. Yes? The question was how many people do this every year on a bike. I don't have actual numbers. I did try to find that out. I just know that during the time that we were there, so say our 10 days that we were there, we passed about 8 people that were doing it. So if you took a 10-day period and multiplied it throughout the 3 months that you could do it, that would probably give you a pretty good indication of how many people do the Iceland Divide. Oh, Nate, go ahead, Nate. Yes, the question was, did I lose some weight? Yeah, I needed to lose a few pounds, so yeah, I came back smaller. There was no way to get around it. You just could not carry enough to feed yourself. Kurt.
Yeah, since this was a route that you would follow, and I had seen the vehicles in the pictures. Does it travel much? If you see like four-wheel drive with
The question was, did we see very many people driving it, or was there many vehicles on the road? The southern part of Iceland, our first, say, 150 miles, where you saw all the green and emerald-colored mountains, in that area, there are a lot of four-wheel drives, big rigs. I'd never seen this before. It's the type where they actually pump up and down the tires. They have a mechanical ability to let them out and pump them back up. A lot of big rigs in the south. Once we got to the Central Highlands, everything changed. Like I said, we went 3 days without seeing anyone or anything, a blade of grass, anything. So, yeah. You have another question for me? Thanks for adding that. That's good. You saw a truck. One Ford 150. Yes, please. The question was, when did I do it? Our trip occurred in July. We went the first week of July and were there for 15 days. The actual riding days were 10 days on our bike, the rest of the time in town or country. Anyone? Yes?
What's next?
I do have a plan, and my husband, after doing the typhoon in the Arctic of Alaska and doing this trip, he's going to let me do what I want to do, and that's going and visiting the Swiss Alps, but I'm doing it hotel to hotel. So this one, he says, is for me. Our packs, you know, Karen, our packs kept them pretty dry, but that day that we had the 18 hours of rain, we really did need to lay everything out. It was just a little bit damp, but every bag is waterproof, and the zippers, you know, it's just a matter of if we were in a river and the water came up where the zippers are, things get damp. If you can keep them off of the zippers, then yeah, they were much better, but things do get damp. I can't say that they're 100% waterproof. Yes?
What kind of sun protection do you use?
What kind of sun protection did I use? You know, really, we have fancy ones and expensive ones, you know, the Ulta MDs and that thing. But my husband's a redhead, and he's always had copper tone, and it really does work. If you're going to be out for all day long, sweating or wet, it just works really well. So we stick to the thing that's been around since, you know, forever. Yeah. Anyone else? Guys, thank you for coming. Appreciate you being here.
Hi guys, thank you so much for coming. If you want to watch this again, we will have this on our YouTube channel, and we're also going to clean it up and make it a little nicer too. So if you want to watch anything, go back. Thank you guys for coming in, and you have a wonderful evening.